would like to begin this episode by acknowledging that I am located in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and I am privileged and honored to live and learn on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishnaabeg Algonquin Nation.
Hello, you're listening to Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front, produced by iGlen Studios, a show for emerging leaders from all professions. To hear from other leaders who have led from the front, made the mistakes, had the triumphs, and are still learning along the way. And now, here's your host, Simon Cardinal.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front. You know, this podcast has often spoken about our leadership journey, the importance of authentically following our true path. And while this information has been rich and impactful, or at least I think it has been, in this episode, you'll hear from Corina Walsh, a certified leadership coach and CEO of Shift People Development. And Corina will talk about how to actually follow our leadership journey. She'll do this by offering practical methods to help emerging leaders get onto that leadership path and continue following it. Now, before we get into it, I would like to do the visual representation. And for myself, I'm wearing a gray sweater. I have my microphone in front of me. I have my headset on. It's a silver and gray. My background is my screenshot wall of a stone wall with the Trench Leadership logo with white surrounded in a purple glow. Corina's wall is, I think, kind of a grayish, bluish grayish color. She's sitting in a black chair. She has a red blazer on with a kind of a white blouse. She's got red hair with glasses. My hair is, of course, still gray on the sides. There's far too much gray. And there's a couple of really nice photos on the back of Corina's wall there. But enough about that. As always, it's about the guest. I'm going to try and be quiet. I'm going to go ahead and welcome in Corina. Hey, how's it going, Corina?
It's going very well. Thank you so much for having me. And that was a wonderful description, visual description, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. The first few times I've done that, it was a challenge, but I've found my way to kind of do it without stumbling too badly. So it can be challenging.
I bet. Yeah.
Well, listen, before we get into the real meat and potatoes of all of this, do you mind taking a moment and telling us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and ultimately how we got to this point?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And this is such an important topic. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. My story really begins with me working for another company about more than 10 years ago now. And, early in my career, I changed jobs a few times trying to find that special place to work where I could share my skills, share my talents, and be a part of a really good team. And unfortunately, I never really found it. Everywhere I worked, the culture was really the same, kind of toxic, dysfunctional. No one was really engaged, not really high, what I would consider to be highly engaged. Anytime I started a new job, I always started off really engaged, wanting to make a difference, wanting to contribute. And I would just get so beaten down by the culture, by the old-fashioned, outdated management practices that were really designed to keep employees in their place, not let people shine. It wasn't working for me. And I knew there was a better way. And for me, the better way was to use my coaching skills, to use my learning and development skills, because that's my background, to build my own company, my own workplace. And that's what I did. I set out to build my own business where I could advise and help companies understand how to build the kind of workplace culture where their employees were excited to come to work each day. We spend a tremendous amount of our lives at work, like a minimum of 1/3 of your life is at work. Could be more depending on how many hours you punch a week. And you deserve to feel good about the place where you're showing up for work each day, whether that's remote working today or actually physically going into the office. And I help companies figure out how to do that. And that work has transformed somewhat over the past 8 years. I started off doing a lot of employee engagement work. And now my work has transformed into almost solely leadership development, because, of course, what I came to realize is that the greatest source of engagement, or the biggest factor that impacts your level of engagement when you show up for work, is your relationship with your manager. Your relationship with your manager is going to heavily influence how you feel when you show up for work every day. So that's how I help companies today. My work has moved to a place where I'm working with frontline leaders to help them understand how to be good frontline leaders, how to engage their employees, how to be a good communicator. And I work with mid-level managers as well to help them understand how to manage those teams of teams and how to be that bridge between the executive and the frontline leaders. And it's really fulfilling work that I get to do.
That's amazing. And I would like to point out two things. First of all, this, like I said earlier before we were chatting, this is an all Canadian group. You're in Newfoundland, I'm in Ottawa, and the editor lives way out in BC. So that's fantastic. And also, you're a fellow podcaster. Do you want to chat about that for just a second?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I actually just started my podcast maybe about 6 months ago, and we're at episode 10, and it's called The People and Culture Success Show. And so on that podcast, I do some solo episodes, but I also do some interviews as well. And every episode is a new strategy, tip, suggestions, and stories on how companies can build better workplaces. So, if you were on my newsletter, you would get very specific management tips. But on the podcast, I kind of zoom out a little bit and I focus a little more on culture and employee engagement. So, whatever it is that you need, wherever it is that you are on your leadership learning journey, there's something for everyone.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm excited to go and check that out and hear more about it. There would be a lot of cross-referencing between this podcast and your podcast. So I feel like there may be some
Definitely.
more things down the road. We'll see how that goes. That's for another conversation. But for now, we're here to talk about leadership learning journeys. And the thing about these, in my opinion, is that everyone's journey is going to be different. And I think with that having been said, it sounds like it's common sense, but it's very easy to look at other people's paths and say, well, that's the path I want to follow. But my experiences have been when I've looked at other folks and I've said, well, that's the type of path I want to follow. That's great for that person. When I actually got on that path, I realized it wasn't for me. But now what do I do? How do I figure that out? So I guess my question to you would be, how can people figure out the path, the leadership learning journey that works well for them?
It's a really great, kind of thing that you're pointing out there. It's wonderful to have people to look up to. It's wonderful to have people to admire and say, I want to be where they are, or I want to, emulate the behavior that they have. And I think you should do that. But to your point, being careful that their exact path might not work for you. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. You're a different person. You might have a different set of values. You have different experience and a different background. So you may need different learning strategies. You may need different types of skills. And the actual work that person who you admire is doing might not actually fulfill you the way it fulfills them. So there's a whole host of reasons why following someone's exact path might not work for you. And how you find your path is the better you know yourself and the more self-awareness that you have and self-realization and self-actualization that you have, the better you know yourself, the more likely you are to know what you need for your learning path and your learning journey. So I know we're kind of told not to look in the past, but sometimes you do need to look behind you and see where you've been. What lit you up? What made you happy? What made you fulfilled in the past? Sometimes I even tell clients to think about what they were drawn to as a child. If you're trying to choose a particular path for yourself, what really got your creativity and your spirit going. And because when we're adults, we tend to choose the practical path. We tend to choose what's practical, the good job or the good career path, but it's got to be both. And, it has to be something that's viable, but it has to be something that lights you up as well. So you do kind of have to look at what you were really drawn to when you were a kid and the stakes weren't quite so high and you didn't have bills coming in. And then you need to look at where you're going in the future and what you want for yourself. And how do you want to add value? How do you want to be of service? And what will you need on your learning journey? What do you need to learn? What do you need to know? How do you need to develop in order to achieve that?
And that sounds to me, what I'm hearing in that is the need to be authentic and honest with ourselves. And that's tough, especially if we have someone that we're really looking up to. I know for myself, when I first joined the military, I had a couple of very, very strong leaders that I really looked up to and I really wanted to emulate. Yeah, so I think it's important to remember my experiences have been anyways, when I had other people I looked up to for whatever reason, I decided that this person was it for me. And when I was trying to figure out how I wanted to go and get promoted and different things, that person's doing that. Well, that's got to be the way to do it. I forgot to remind myself that that's not what I want to do. And I think it's about that authenticity and being completely honest. And to bring you back to the point where you said, look back and see the things that you loved. Because when I had a chance to really look at the person that I was strongly invested in, if you want to word it that way, realized we had a lot of differences as well. But I was only looking at things through rose-colored glasses and all of the different types of things that can tend to happen. So do you have any thoughts on that at all? Or
I do. Yeah, I think that's such a fantastic point that you're making. And I've coached as a leadership coach. I've had some tough conversations with managers and executives who had a certain vision in mind, similar to what you described. They were telling themselves a story. Maybe it was a person that they admired and wanted to follow, or even just kind of a story that they had created for themselves. Oh, I'm going to have this career in XYZ industry and I'm going to become this industry leader. And trying to follow that path because of the story they're telling themselves about how it's going to make them feel, or what it'll give them if they follow that path, and they realize it's crushing them and crushing their soul. And I have to be the one to tell them, why are you on this path? It's not fulfilling you, it's not giving you what you want, it's not authentic to you. You're fighting your natural tendencies and your natural abilities. If something is natural for you, it's not going to feel as hard. It's going to light you up. Back to your, point of authenticity. So if it's starting to feel like a grind to you, that could be a sign to you that you're not on the right path. And maybe you've been telling yourself some kind of story about why you're on this path or why you're following this particular person.
well, very much so. And if I could use myself as an example, I joined the military. Like I always knew I wanted to be in the military. There was never any question. My father was in the military. I have a very extended line of military people on either side of my family, and it was something I knew I always wanted to do, and I was very lucky with that. And I did that for 26 years in the regular force, and it came to a point in 2019 where I had an opportunity to have a real authentic look at myself. And as I was going through my career, I was doing all the things that I wanted to do and all the things that I was expected to do and all the things that I expected I needed to do to get as far forward in the military as that I could. And I was doing great at it. I was in succession planning, all the different things. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in 2019, I realized, wow, I had an opportunity to look at myself honestly, authentically, and realized the passion that I had for doing those things was no longer there. And
Yeah.
not that I was upset with the military or any of those types of things. It was just my priority shifted. I had a bit more of a realization. I got older, if we can be honest. You join when you're 19 and all of a sudden you're 46. That's a difference there. It's your entire adult life.
Yeah.
And so I had a choice to make. Do I keep going forward? And I was doing, as I mentioned, doing quite well. But I had a choice to make. Do I keep going forward in this position that was only going to get busier and have even less passion for it, or do I make a shift? So I did. I retired from the regular force. I took a job that, because you still have to pay the bills. I'd be realistic about these things.
Yeah.
But I started flying more, and I have my running program, and I ride my motorcycle. I've been riding my motorcycle a lot less lately, to be honest, but I'm hoping to get more into that this summer. I've made a promise myself for that, and following a lot of the things that created passion in my life and gave me energy instead of it was a grind to get through it. And after a couple of years away from the Canadian Forces, an opportunity came up, and I'm now actually a reservist, so a part-time role here in Ottawa, and I'm the squadron warrant officer at 412 Squadron. So
Wow.
I've been able to do the things in my life that I love. I found a balance between being able to serve my country, because that desire never left, that passion never left, and still be able to have a job to go and pay the bills and go fly airplanes and do all the different things that I want to do. And it's about finding that balance. And I'd also think, and it just came to me right now, it's about understanding it's not all going to happen right in one moment. It's a
Yeah.
journey. It's the marathon. That's a very long-winded example, but does that make sense?
It makes total sense because it's part one of that is, the authenticity that you mentioned, which is being honest with yourself. But then there's the flexibility. What I'm hearing from you is that you knew your values or maybe your priorities, your lifestyle had changed, which is what happens to every single one of us. But then you had the flexibility and the self-awareness to know that this is not exactly what I want anymore. I'm going to make some changes, some shifts here to make this work for me. And you're still serving in the way that you want to serve. It's just looks a little different from the outside. You're part-time now. You have other things going on. So that is the whole point of having, keeping an eye on this learning journey that's so important for us. Recognizing our priorities are going to change. Where you are in your life, like, if you're 19 years old, you don't have kids yet, you will have different things you want to do, different priorities. And then fast forward to our 40s and we have families and mortgages and everything like that. And maybe the decisions we made in our 20s are not working for us anymore. So it's that flexibility that's a key aspect of, I think, of that learning journey as well.
Absolutely. I, I guess I have a question for you. Do you think people should have a formal leadership learning journey, or do they just should you just kind of go as they come as they go? What are your thoughts on that?
I do think it's both and, but I do think you need a formal leadership journey. Um, a learning journey is a strategic approach to your own growth and development. And whatever way you document it, whether you put it in a Google Doc or you have a formal plan with your HR manager or your own manager, whatever form it actually takes, you need to keep track of where you've been, where you are right now, and where you want to go. And the best form of learning and development, because of course that's my background, and I'm sure, given your background as well, you understand this. The best form of learning and development is when you get a chance to learn technical skills, maybe through some formal training, but then you get to go back to work and you get to practice those skills in real time. And then maybe you get some informal learning through mentoring or through other people in your workplace. And that's how we build mastery. And as you go through your life and your career, you're going to be faced with different types of opportunities, but also different types of challenges. And the skills that you had and the behaviors that you had back at the beginning of your career, they're still important, but they might not be helping you that much anymore. So most of us progress in our career, not everyone, but most of us do take on more responsibility, take on bigger roles, perhaps get a few promotions. And what you'll notice is as you move along your career journey, you're going to need different skills, different behaviors, different attitudes to keep succeeding and to maintain your resilience. And if you have a learning journey documented, if you have something a little more formal, it helps with that authenticity that we've been talking about, but it supports you to understand what it is you need. If you find yourself at that point in your career where you're like, things are not going so well, I'm struggling more than I used to, but I'm not sure why. If you had that learning journey documented, maybe you can take it out and talk to someone about it, whether it's your own manager or a mentor or a leadership coach. And you can say, where are the skills gaps? Where are the behavior gaps that I need to develop here that are going to propel me into that next level of my career? And that doesn't necessarily have to be up. That could be across, or in your case, it could be shifting from full-time to part-time. There's no exact path, and it doesn't have to be linear, and it doesn't have to be down and straight up. But if you have that learning journey planned out, it's just going to be so much more easier for you to understand where the gaps are, to help you succeed in that next level of your journey.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And if I could come back to my example earlier, how the realizations that I had with that ended up being that I was off doing my master's degree in leadership, and I was getting ready. I was in my cohort. I was the only person who was in the military. And so what happened was I had been insulated inside my own little bubble for 25 plus years. And that was fine. There was nothing wrong with that. But all of a sudden I was exposed to this world outside of the world that I had known my entire adult life. And there was a shift in that. And that helped me realize, okay, there's other things out here. I can do other things, and I'll make it. I'll be okay. And I think my point in that is it's about having people's eyes open to the possibilities of other things. It's easy to get stuck in the plan, especially if someone builds something up and understanding that, okay, this is the path I want to go, or this is in my work environment. These are the steps I need to do to get promoted or whatever. This is the path. Well, that's your organization's path. That's not necessarily your path. If you want to get to those points, it's great, but what is your own path to get there? And sometimes it's not more often than not, probably it's not a straight line. There's probably a couple of curves in there. Does that make any sense at all?
Oh, hello there. It's Glenn, the voiceover artist. And if you're hearing me, that means we're at the midpoint of this episode. Do you have an idea for an episode that you feel is vital for emerging leaders? Leave the idea in the comments section, and if your topic is chosen, you will have the opportunity to join us as a co-host during the recording session. So, drop us a note and let's talk. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you, and if you feel we've earned it, please tell your friends and leave a review to help us grow our following. And now, back to the show.
That makes perfect sense. And that's a great point that you're making, that, an organization's path for their managers and employees within the company or within the organization, it might not always work for you. I love it when a company or an organization has a learning and development path, a leadership development path. Obviously, that's what I recommend for every company. But for you personally, you might realize that that's not fulfilling you, or that's not what you need anymore, depending on where you are in life. And again, another reason why having your own plan is so important.
Oh, I completely agree. And it's easy to get caught up in watching your peers get promoted or moved around or doing whatever, going, oh, wow, yeah, I sure wish I had that role or whatnot. And in the military, it's even more so because the chain of command is so clearly defined, and the institutional perception of the metric of success is the higher rank you are. And even in the military, or even at my rank level, so I'm a master warrant officer, and at that rank level, it's the second highest rank you can achieve as a senior non-commissioned member, and we can be called sir or ma'am as part of the thing, is as a recognition of having achieved that level of position in the rank and the forces. And it's easy to get swept up that, oh, I need to get to that point. I need to do that. And I know for myself, my long-term goal was always to get to the rank of sergeant because of other examples I've used in many podcasts in the past. And then all of a sudden here I am at this rank level, and it's a bit of a surreal moment. And I was like, oh, okay, I made it to this point, but now what? And that was part of my journey. Now what? I'm here. Now what? Where do I go from here? It's challenging.
Exactly. And, when I'm coaching leaders and they have that milestone in mind, one of the coaching questions I ask them is, what do you think it will do for you when you get to that level? How do you think you're finally going to feel when you get to that level? And sometimes we're using those milestones and promotions or levels, whatever you want to call it, because we think it will do something for us or finally make us feel a certain way. But I remind the leaders that I coach that you can feel that way right now. You don't have to wait for that promotion. Whatever you think that's going to do for you, you can have that now. And it's never the destination. I know it's a bit cringy, a bit cliche to say it, but it's never the destination. Humans are motivated by the journey. That's why when we achieve a certain milestone, we never feel the way we think we're going to feel, because it was the journey anyway. It was the motivation of going after something that made us feel the way we wanted to feel. So I think that's really important what you're pointing out there.
Oh, thank you very much for that. And you're absolutely right. It is about that journey, because how often, very few people have sat there and said, oh, okay, that's it. I made it. What's next? Look at, I'd like to offer President Barack Obama. After he was the president, he still goes and wins Oscars and Emmys and all these different things, because he's not just going to sit around like, oh, I was the president, I'm good, done now. Time to go out to pasture. You keep finding new things to do. So
exactly.
Amazing.
We're fueled by by that of trying to get there, not what we'll actually get when we get there.
Oh, I completely agree. I'm a bit of a Star Trek nerd, and it's about the exploration, about that thing that we don't know, about reaching for that next thing and exploring and learning and growing and doing all the different things on some type of journey.
Exactly.
I love it. if you're okay with it, I'd kind of like to shift gears just a little bit and ask you, do you have any types of practical leadership learning journey tools that the guests may be able to use?
Yeah. So what I do for companies is and managers is that I point out to them, what a typical leadership journey should look like. Now, of course, I'm always careful with that to remind people that your leadership learning journey might not always look exactly like this, but here's an idea of what it should look like. And, I tell managers and companies that when you are a frontline leader, so when you go from individual performer to being a first time manager, there's a certain skill set that you need to learn. You need a foundational leadership program. You need to build up skills in management styles, how to delegate, how to give feedback, how to coach, how to get through a difficult conversation. And then when you master those skills and you move from frontline leadership to say mid-level leadership, the middle manager. The middle manager is really the core of a company, and you got to have a strong core because they are the link joining executive leadership with that frontline leadership. And mid-level managers deserve their own leadership development, and they need their own leadership development. So at the mid-level, you need to understand how to manage other managers, manage multiple teams, manage up and across. You need to build your emotional intelligence because the higher you go in your leadership journey, the less you rely on technical skills and the more you rely on people leadership skills anyway. So it's critical that you start building that emotional intelligence at that point. And then when you're at the executive level, you need executive level leadership skills. You need strategy, decision making, all of those things that are going to help you deal with complexity, adaptability. And I have mapped out that journey for my clients and for anyone who wants that, just so you have an idea of what you're supposed to be learning at every stage of leadership. And even if you're not in a leadership role yet, this is the type of tool that is helpful for you to look at. So, because you don't have to wait, by the way, until you're in a formal leadership role to start building your leadership skills. Leadership skills help us navigate all sorts of situations at work, whether it's difficult conversations or trying to influence someone. So I encourage people to start building those leadership skills before they get into a formal leadership role, and then benefit from the formal training and coaching that can help them. So, I don't want anyone to take that tool and use it necessarily verbatim because it could look a little different for you based on what type of career you're in, but it's still helpful to know what those skills are and behaviors that you're going to need to develop in those different leadership levels.
Oh, most certainly. And it's I think what I'm hearing in this is it's important to understand that it will change. And as you're progressing through the different ranks or positions, whatever the terminology might be, understanding that the expectations are different. And because of that, that journey is now going to have to adjust itself a little bit to expand, to open up the blinders to see more of that world that's out there and be open to it.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. Just be open to it.
Be open to it. Exactly. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room with a group of executive leaders in a company, and I'll just say something like something about navigating a difficult conversation or having a coaching conversation with your employee, and an executive will raise their hand and they'll say, "Oh, we've never had training on that. We've never had formal training on having a difficult conversation. We've never had formal training on how to coach an employee." And when you think about that, when you think about how many executives are out there who don't have a foundational leadership level, training and program, it's because they've never been introduced to this concept of a leadership learning journey, whether the organization didn't have it, whether they didn't know they needed it, whatever the case. But just think about how different would our world look? How different would our economies look? How different would our companies look? What would our workplace cultures be like if every person who started off on a journey, working for a company, had a leadership learning journey, built their foundation leadership skills, then moved up to those core middle manager skills, and then got their executive level skills? How different would our world look if we all had that supportive learning and development journey laid out for us?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking about that, two things come to mind, and I've mentioned them in the past. So the first one is that more often than not, and I'm speaking predominantly to North America because that's what I have more knowledge and experience with. More often than not, in North America, the metric that is used to help leaders decide if someone can be a leader is based off their technical skill set, not their proven leadership skill set.
Yeah.
And with your vigorous nodding, I think you're agreeing with what I'm saying in that. And the example I use all the time is so and so is the greatest welder inside a group of 3 people. You must be able to lead those welders. Not necessarily. And I'm not suggesting that's not the case, but I'm saying that comes down to the person, not the person's own personality, and a lot of times of whether or not they're going to be successful, not their technical skill set. And then the other thing I'd like to bring up with that is in North America, the average time or the average age for a leader or someone inside an organization to receive some type of formalized leadership education or training is 42. And more often than not, yeah, exactly. And more often than not, that's 10 to 12 years inside someone's career. And more often than not, you're a mid to early senior level position. It's too late. You've missed the ball. And that's a huge challenge.
Well, think about all the bad habits you've built up at that point. And not everyone develops bad habits, but a lot of the managers that come into my programs, they've been in their management role 10 years easy. And unfortunately, what happens with managers who don't have formal leadership training is that they develop bad habits as coping skills, as coping mechanisms. So many of us, if you don't have training on difficult conversations, you'll develop a habit of avoidance because you don't know how to handle the conversation. So then you have to unlearn, you have to go to work unlearning. Most of the managers that come into my program have a tremendous amount of unlearning to do on their learning journey in order to get started on the path that the development path that I've created for companies. But you bring up a really interesting point there too, is that, go ahead and promote your technical person to management. I don't have a problem with that because I can't stop you from doing that. But get them into a people management program like mine as fast as possible to give them the people management skills that they need. Get them those foundational skills right away. I'm not going to tell you to not promote someone, but just get them the learning and development that they need. Like, you would never pick a random person off the street and say, you're going to be an accountant today. I like your attitude. Let's make you an accountant, and not give them the training that they need to be an accountant. But that's what we do to managers, right? That's what we do. We take a good employee. You're going to be a manager today. And manager is a job. It's a job with its own skill set, just like welder, teacher, accountant, whatever. So yeah, a few important things there, but again, just another reason why that learning journey is so important.
Oh, absolutely. Especially considering quite often the metric for success is that step up, the promotion inside the world and then inside in the organization. And so people feel the pressure to want to get those spots and to take those things because look at me, I'm being successful, especially when we're comparing ourselves to our peers inside our groups. That's huge. That peer pressure is never going to go away. So that's why I feel the learning journey is so important as a reminder, said, okay, so-and-so got this position, but that's okay because my path is to go this way. I want to get to this point. And if it's written down, it's a physical reminder.
Exactly. And you're hitting on another good point there is that, again, we often think that if we get a certain job title, it'll make us happy. It'll make us feel a certain way. But truly, the biggest moments of fulfillment in my life haven't come from a job title or winning a certain business award or landing a certain client. They've come from those messages that I get back from managers, the Slack message or the text or the email from someone who says, someone just told me I'm the best manager they ever had. And because they've gone through my program. That's why I'm doing this. It's not about reaching a certain revenue goal. It's not about getting a certain number of clients. That's nice too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
That's nice too. But it's the service that I can provide, and it's the transformation when you've come through one of my programs and I get those messages back. That's where it is for me. So that's what I emphasize with my clients too, is that, job titles are nice. Excuse me. Job titles are nice. But it's not going to make you feel the way you think it's going to make you feel.
Well, would you like to take a moment and talk about your specific program and how it might be able to help people out?
Well, I mean, of course, I would love to, if you don't mind.
Of
Um,
course.
my first program for frontline leaders is called Managing Made Easy. And I called it that because I don't believe managing, for the first time has to be hard, but I know it will be hard without the right tools and skills that you need. So Managing Made Easy is really foundational leadership skills. It's manager awareness. So what are your management styles? Is it working for your team? How to delegate, how to give feedback, how to have a basic coaching conversation, how to navigate a difficult conversation, and then they learn the basics of employee engagement and human motivation. Really foundational skills that you need to be effective at being a supervisor, a team leader, any type of frontline manager. And then there's the second program, which encompasses skills that you need to lead at the mid level. So I'm talking about senior manager, director level, leading teams of teams, how to develop other managers, how to manage up and across, how will you influence executives, how do you manage workflow so that you don't become the bottleneck, because a lot of middle managers end up becoming the bottleneck on their own teams. So those are the group programs that I offer. And again, my group programs are designed to provide that clear leadership development path for managers in any company. And
Uh,
thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about that.
oh, very much so. I'm intrigued by it. I'm hoping we could chat some more about it afterwards. And you talk about things like the manager awareness and how to delegate and how to have those conversations. Those are the exact types of things that, at the risk of plugging my own podcast, are the types of things that I try and bring up as episodes for this. And it's because when I went along my journey, I didn't receive a lot of these things until far later in my career. And I think the big shift was when as a warrant officer in the Canadian Forces, and the U.S. military is very similar to that. We shift from being a tactical leader to a strategic/institutional leader,
Yeah.
and that focus overnight and expectation to be able to do this overnight completely changes. And that was a big challenge. And while the Canadian Forces military leadership training program is excellent to prepare you for the rank level and potentially the next rank level, it focuses specifically on the job that we're doing at that rank level, but it not so much anything outside of that, and that's a challenge as well. And it took me a while. Like we didn't have conversations about how to delegate, or we just said make sure you delegate. Well, thanks. No kidding. I know I need to delegate, or make sure you're honest with your people. Well, thanks. If as a warrant officer, I don't know to be honest with my people, I probably shouldn't be there. But it's I think having conversations and having programs like yours to how to actually sit down and do it, because I think that quite often there's an assumption that said, well, I said to be honest. Well, okay, that's not always that easy. Sometimes more often than not, being honest with your employees means having a hard, frank conversation. Or being honest is, okay, I'm a micromanager. I need to learn how to delegate. And the program that you're talking about that you offer teaches people how to physically sit down and do the things. And that is what is absolutely important at those frontline leaders, at those emerging leader levels, because in my opinion, and I promise I'll finish up here, we are at that technical level still. We're still used to thinking of working with our hands, working at that system, physically doing the work. And your program is, it sounds to me, organized in such a way that they are still physically doing the work. So feeling like something is getting accomplished and learning and growing along their path. Does that make sense at all?
Yes, and that is exactly it. I've taken those critical skills, as you mentioned, delegating, feedback, coaching, etc., and I give managers this technical format on how to actually do these tasks. So you're still leveraging your technical expertise, but you're gradually moving into the people leadership mindset and behaviors that you need. Because when you're on the front line of leadership, when you're supervisor, team leader, whatever the title is, you're almost kind of wearing two hats, because you're still kind of technical, but you're also got one foot in the people leadership space. Yes, you're still maybe a part of doing the technical work, but you also have to be responsible for getting other people to do work. So how do you do that? It's not as simple as just saying, to your point, not as simple as just saying, just delegate. No, you have to know how to communicate. You have to know how to motivate and inspire other people, because if not, you've got to stay on top of them. And nobody wants to do that. So yeah, it's a combination. The first level is really the combination of the technical and bringing in the people management skills, because you probably were promoted for your technical ability, but now you need to understand how to get other people, how to achieve results through other people. So if you're still thinking that leadership is just about the technical, it's going to exhaust you, I think. And a lot of managers that end up in my programs are at that stage where they are feeling that exhaustion because they've been trying to be a driver of performance from this technical aspect or this technical approach, because they're missing the people leadership approach, like the kind that I deliver.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as a podcast that is meant to target and talk to emerging leaders, this is exactly what we're doing. And that's,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm excited about it. I'm all jazzed up.
That's great.
Well, listen, I think we've been having a fantastic conversation about this. And I'm wondering, do you have any final points or thoughts at all before we move into the lightning round?
I would say that I would advise anyone to take ownership over their own learning journey. Even if your company, so of course, another issue that a lot of people come to me with is that their company won't support them in any learning. Now, that breaks my heart a little. But if your company won't support you, develop your own learning journey. Go out and buy the books, listen to the podcasts, take as many webinars and online courses as you possibly can. I offer a lot of this stuff up for free. I know your podcast is tremendously valuable for anyone on that learning journey. So you don't have to wait for your company, your employer, or organization to provide that to you. Take ownership over your own learning journey and start on your own.
Well, thank you so much for that. And with that, well, listen, we've had a fantastic chat here. We've talked a lot about a whole bunch of different ways that leaders can learn how to get themselves on their leadership learning journey. And so with that, I'm wondering, if people want to reach out to you, how might they be able to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a wonderful way to reach out to me. I post almost daily on something leadership related or career or success related. So please, Corina Walsh on LinkedIn. My website is shiftpd.com. So SHIFTPD.com. And on my website, you'll find all sorts of free downloads. My podcast, The People and Culture Success Show, wherever you listen to podcasts. Yeah, I think that probably is enough for now.
That's fantastic. And what I've done is I've, of course, put all those links inside the show notes so people will be able to access that information as soon as they have an opportunity. Well, Corina, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. And from one Canadian to another, a boot, poutine, beaver tails, all of it.
Exactly. Maple syrup and hockey.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I loved our conversation. This topic is so important. So I am very, very grateful that you got the conversation started today.
Thank you. Take care. Well, that's a wrap from the front. In this episode, we realized that it was important to ask ourselves the question, what do I think it will do for me when I get there? And that's the big part about this, is that when we get there, it's not even about getting there. It's about that journey along the way and being honest about the path that we want to take. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, leadership without passion limits the depth of your vision.
Never miss an episode by following us on all of your favorite feeds. While you're there, please consider leaving an episode review and let us know what topics you would like to hear about. Be sure to join us next week with your host, Simon Cardinal, for another episode of Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front, produced by iGlen Studios, music provided by Ashamal of Music.